Samuel Jeremiah and I are neighbors and grew up together. And when someone bullies me, he is always the first to rush forward. In a childish voice, he shouted, "You are not allowed to bully Zora Judd. He is like a little knight, always guarding me. Every time there is something delicious and fun, the first thing that comes to mind is me. Zora Judd, here you go." Samuel Jeremiah's voice is always gentle and firm, with an inexplicable sense of security that reaches my heart. When I was in high school, I was faced with complex and difficult math problems, and I was desperately biting my pen. Looking at Samuel Jeremiah next to me, I couldn't help but poke his arm. He looked up at me, with an inquiring look in his eyes. "Samuel Jeremiah, how do you do this?" He glanced at the topic and then patiently explained it to me. Sometimes I would deliberately tease him, saying that he didn't understand, and let him tell me over and over again. He is never impatient, always patiently explaining over and over again. After speaking, he would gently ask me, "Zora Judd, do you understand?" I looked at his serious face, and my heartbeat suddenly skipped a beat. I don't know when my feelings for him changed. I'm no longer satisfied with a relationship where I'm just good friends. I hope to be able to go one step further and become his girlfriend. So, I began to hint at him. "Samuel Jeremiah, do you think we'll be together in the future?" He was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "Zora Judd, of course we'll always be together. I don't mean this together, I mean..." Before I could finish speaking, he interrupted me. "Zora Judd, you are the most important person to me, and your mind is clear to you." Hearing his words, I looked up in surprise, seeing that he has always been very aggressive. Now even his ears are red, and there is still a trace of expectation and nervousness in his eyes. Like a puppy, I thought about it unconsciously, and then I realized that he liked me too. So, I plucked up the courage to reach out and hug him. "Samuel Jeremiah, I like you." He froze, and it took him a while to react and hug me back. "Zora Judd, I like you too." His voice rang in my ears with a hint of trembling. I felt the hot body temperature of the teenager, and vent his sincere love through the thin clothes. I heard Samuel Jeremiah's voice ringing in my ears again, but with a hoarseness that I had never heard before. "Zora Judd, can I kiss you?" I was a little shy and hummed softly. As soon as I was about to say yes, I felt a soft touch imprint on my lips. He kissed me cautiously as if he were a treasure. It was my first kiss, and I was so nervous that I didn't even know where to put my hand. Samuel Jeremiah sensed my nervousness and gently took my hand. "Don't be afraid, Zora Judd, I'm super skilled." His lips were soft, like a delicious pudding. His palms are wide and warm, which makes me feel at ease. Gradually, I also relaxed and immersed myself in this kiss. Samuel Jeremiah seemed a little insatiable, and he kissed me that night, and each time he coaxed me to say it was the last time, but he never stopped. Finally, I felt my mouth was swollen, and gave him a gentle push. "Samuel Jeremiah, don't kiss me. Are you a puppy?" He stopped, but his arms were still tightly wrapped around me, refusing to let go. I lay in his arms, listening to the sound of his powerful heartbeat, and I felt extremely happy. "Then I'm just Zora Judd's dog." The young man's voice was slightly hoarse, but his tone was as sweet as honey. Thinking back, I looked at Samuel Jeremiah, who suddenly appeared in front of me, a little confused. When he saw me, he sat down on the ground in a panic. Bony hands trembled and hugged my calves. "It's just that he hasn't seen him for one night. Why did he make such a mess of himself? What about my sunny cute puppy? How did you become a broken puppy?" I don't know why he became like this, so I couldn't help but try to pull him up first. "Samuel Jeremiah, you get up first. Let's talk about something," I said softly, and my voice was a little seductive. But before I could finish my sentence, he interrupted me. "Great, Zora Judd, I'm finally seeing you again. I miss you so much." Really, I'm a little puzzled. Wasn't Samuel Jeremiah and I inseparable last night? What's wrong with you, Samuel Jeremiah? He looked up at me, his eyes full of pain and struggle. He choked up. "Zora Judd, I don't want to be a male lead. I don't want to have any plots. I don't want to love anyone else. I only love you, Zora Judd." Listening to his incoherent words, I was shocked. What male lead? What's the plot? Samuel Jeremiah took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "Zora Judd, I'm actually the male protagonist of a novel, and the heroine is not you. I looked at him in shock and asked softly, am I in the story? Samuel Jeremiah closed his eyes in pain and nodded imperceptibly. You're a female partner, and it's a female partner who doesn't end well. What do you mean? Such an exciting thing is also what happened to me, Zora Judd. I didn't expect the legendary vicious female partner to be myself. I couldn't help but wonder how I ended. What happened to me? Samuel Jeremiah's voice was a little muffled. The family is ruined. The Silver Bell is imprisoned. And finally he dies. I swallowed nervously. I really didn't expect it. I thought I would be miserable, but I didn't expect it to be so miserable. No, I have to avoid a miserable life in advance. I tentatively continued to ask, who is that heroine? The heroine of this novel is Sophia, but for some reason, she suddenly disappeared. Gone. Well, and this kind of operation? Samuel Jeremiah's tone was slightly lighter at the mention of Sophia's disappearance. It's because she's gone that I can get out of the plot for a while. This is also good news for me. Without the heroine, the plot will not be pushed, and Samuel Jeremiah and I can continue to be together. Does that mean we're okay for now? Samuel Jeremiah nodded, but the next second he became sad. However, the power of the plot is too strong. His voice was bleak. Once she comes back, I can't control myself at all. So Zora Judd, I wonder if Sophia can escape the plot. Can I also hide? As long as I don't take the initiative to contact the outside world, then the plot shouldn't find me, right? Samuel Jeremiah was ostensibly suggesting, but in fact he was so cohesive that he was sure I wouldn't say no. It's a pity that I didn't hear the temptation in his tone. Seeing that I took the bait, he worked harder. Is it okay for Zora Judd to lock me up? Listening to his crying voice, my heart melted. I can't help it. I'm too hungry for Samuel Jeremiah. I took him into my arms, and patted him on the back to comfort him. It's okay. Samuel Jeremiah doesn't cry. If you cry again, you will become a wrong puppy. Samuel Jeremiah was barely able to stop crying. His eyes were red, and his mouth was pursed. He arched his head to my neck again, and said in a sullen voice, is it okay for Zora Judd to leash the puppy? I'm afraid that if you don't tie me down, I'll get lost again. I just want to be with my Zora Judd. Oh my God, who can withstand the puppy spoiling? Life is given to you. Life is given to you. Cute puppy, let my sister kiss it. My mind was full of perverse thoughts, but I didn't notice the cunning that flashed in Samuel Jeremiah's eyes. He opened his mouth and licked the sharp tiger teeth with his tongue, and his face was bound to be triumphant. But in the next second, Samuel Jeremiah pretended to be my favorite puppy again. Aggrievedly, he took out a leash from his pocket, held it in both hands and handed it to me. Or use this. Zora Judd, please. I can't live without you. Please. The puppy can't do without Zora Judd. I looked at him in shock, and then at the leash in his hand, and the brilliant thoughts in my mind just now were swept away, replaced by endless distress. I love that Samuel Jeremiah is coquettish, but I never want to see him look so inferior. Samuel Jeremiah has always been proud. He is dignified, has excellent grades, and has been a star-studded existence since he was a child. When has there ever been such a humble gesture? My favorite Samuel Jeremiah shouldn't be like this. I took a deep breath, suppressed my emotions, and asked him as calmly as I could, Samuel Jeremiah, can you tell me what's wrong with you? His lips trembled, as if he remembered a terrible memory, but under my questioning, I still struggled to speak. I've been forced to go through the plot many times, but every time I miss you. Whenever I want to break free from the plot, there is a powerful force that controls me and makes me unable to help myself. I tried to end myself, but I couldn't do it, and the plot, in order to take revenge on me, transferred all the harm I did to myself. Zora Judd, I can't bear it. Zora Judd, I've tried over and over again, but I've lost you. Speaking of which, he was completely devastated. Zora Judd, you know what? I was reluctant to have any contact with Sophia, but I was forced to entangle her again and again, and in order to achieve an absolutely perfect plot, I was forced to do it over and over again. Why me? I really can't take it anymore. He fell to his knees, his hands clutching his hair tightly, and his whole body trembled. I don't know if Samuel Jeremiah is true or not. I just know that he is in great pain at the moment. All I know is that I feel sorry for him. I crouched down and hugged him gently. Samuel Jeremiah, don't be afraid. I stroked his hair and comforted him softly. Zora Judd, don't leave me. Don't leave me. All I want is you. He hugged me back tightly, like grasping at the last straw. I took a deep breath and made a decision in my mind. Whether Samuel Jeremiah is true or not, I will be there for him, because I love him and he loves me. And that's enough. I cupped his face and looked at him firmly. Samuel Jeremiah, listen, I won't leave you. I'll be with you always. He looked at me in disbelief. Zora Judd, really? I nodded and gave him an affirmative reply. Really? He stood up suddenly, hugged me tightly, and spun around a few times. Zora Judd, Zora Judd. He shouted my name with the joy of being lost and regained. But he wilted very quickly, and put the leash in my hand again. Zora Judd, you'd better keep me on a leash. He didn't seem to know how to speak, and was silent for a long time before he whispered, I'm afraid, in the previous episode, I didn't have time to save you every time. As long as I'm like Sophia, I shouldn't have started the plot. I looked at him cautiously and expectantly, and my heart ached. Has always been a high-spirited young man, but at this moment he doesn't even dare to look at his lover's eyes. I stood on tiptoe, and kissed him softly in the eye. Samuel Jeremiah, I believe in you, so I promise you, I'm going to keep you on a tight leash to me. Samuel Jeremiah never wants to leave Zora Judd. He stiffened, then hugged me harder. Don't leave, never leave. I'm Zora Judd's puppy, and always will be. His voice was choked. Zora Judd, I love you. I really love you. I flicked his forehead lightly and smiled back. Samuel Jeremiah, I love you too. Love, love. Samuel Jeremiah's eyes suddenly lit up amazingly, as if they were filled with tiny pieces of starlight. Zora Judd, can you say it again? He hugged me, buried his head in my neck, and his voice was muffled. Samuel Jeremiah, I love you. I patiently said it again, hugging him back. I only love you. He seemed to be extremely moved, and the hand holding me was trembling slightly. I gently stroked his back, and comforted him silently. We just hugged each other tightly, as if we wanted to merge each other into our bodies. Samuel Jeremiah was so tired that she fell asleep in my arms in a short time. He had been tortured to the point that he had barely slept during this time, and now he was finally able to sleep peacefully. I looked at him distressedly, gently laid him on the bed, and covered him with a quilt. Samuel Jeremiah looked obedient as he fell asleep, and his frowning brow was evacuated. I sat quietly on the edge of the bed and looked at him, my heart filled with love. Samuel Jeremiah, fear not, I will always be there for you. From that day on, I began the life of Kanida Zhangjiao. Except for the necessary things, I pushed everything off, and every day at school and home. Samuel Jeremiah is also very well behaved, staying at home every day and not communicating with anyone but me. I knew he was avoiding the so-called plot. Looking at his cautious way every day, I feel very distressed. What a proud man Samuel Jeremiah used to be. Now he is forced to live this life. It's all to blame for the so-called plot. There was a surge of anger in my heart, but there was nothing I could do. We can only be careful to avoid all possible plot trigger points, and not let the so-called plot take advantage of it. But strange things are getting more and more. In the past few days, many accidents have happened to me. An inexplicable falling object from a high altitude, walking on the road and almost being hit by a car. Even when I was cooking in the kitchen, the gas almost leaked. Samuel Jeremiah double-checks all the equipment in the house every day to make sure there is no danger before daring me to use it. Even 3 meals a day he made in advance, and he didn't dare to let me eat outside. Even when he sleeps, he only sleeps lightly, and he wakes up whenever I make the slightest noise. Samuel Jeremiah is almost glued to me these days, but it is still inevitable that something bad will happen. Samuel Jeremiah noticed something was wrong, and he looked at me nervously. Zora Judd, what's going on? I shook my head. I don't know, but I don't think it's an accident. It was the plot that discovered me. Samuel Jeremiah's face turned pale in an instant. It's the plot that is taking revenge on us. He hugged me tightly, his voice trembling. Zora Judd, what should I do? I don't want you to get hurt. I'm so scared. As soon as you open your eyes, you're gone again. I'm so selfish. I'm so scared I'm going to hurt you. I gently patted him on the back and comforted him softly. Samuel Jeremiah, don't be afraid. Let's figure it out together, and we'll figure it out. He hugged me tightly, as if that was the only way to put him at ease. We sat on the couch, Samuel Jeremiah frowning and his face uneasy. Zora Judd, the plot is already on your radar. Samuel Jeremiah's voice was full of powerlessness. It's my fault. It's me. Selfish. Samuel Jeremiah, don't say that. I shook his hand. We're all in this together, and no matter what happens, we're going to face it together. Besides, you're good to me, too. If the plot is pushed, I still don't have a good ending. Samuel Jeremiah looked at me, with tears in his eyes. Thank you, Zora Judd. Fool, we are lovers, and we don't need to say this between us. He held my hand tightly, and the tension gradually eased. His head rested lightly on my shoulder, and we both snuggled up on the couch together. But suddenly, the chandelier above my head fell and smashed straight at me. Zora Judd, be careful. Samuel Jeremiah screamed and slammed down on me. The pain I had expected didn't come, and I opened my eyes to see Samuel Jeremiah's face pale, and blood running down his forehead. Samuel Jeremiah. I shouted his name in a panic. Zora Judd. At this moment, Samuel Jeremiah suddenly hugged me into his arms, and let out a whimper of pain. Zora Judd, I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I didn't know it would happen. I'm sorry, Zora Judd. It's all my fault. I'm too greedy. I should have stayed away from your life sooner. As long as I don't show up in front of you, you'll be fine. Samuel Jeremiah suddenly hugged me tightly, and let go of me after a few moments. It's okay, Zora Judd. As long as I leave now, it should be too late. Samuel Jeremiah was still bleeding from the wound on his head, but he was about to turn away. I ejaculated from the couch. Samuel Jeremiah, you dare to go and try it today. Don't move. I was by him and cried, almost reflexively. Samuel Jeremiah stopped when he heard my cry. Samuel Jeremiah seemed a little confused, and hugged me into his arms. Zora Judd, don't cry. When you cry, my heart breaks. I shook my hands and wiped the blood from his face, but the blood grew more and more, and I couldn't stop it. Samuel Jeremiah stopped talking. Let's go to the hospital. I struggled to get out of his arms, but Samuel Jeremiah held me tightly, and refused to let go. Zora Judd, I don't want to go to the hospital. He shook his head with difficulty, his face frighteningly pale. I don't go to the hospital. It's enough for Zora Judd to stay with me. His voice grew weaker and weaker, and I panicked and tried to break free from his embrace, but his arms were firmly wrapped around me like iron pincers. Samuel Jeremiah. I shouted his name and tears welled up in my eyes. Zora Judd, I'm so scared the plot is going to start happening out of nowhere. His voice was full of pleading and uneasiness, and my heart ached as if it had been torn apart. I will not leave you, Samuel Jeremiah. I will never leave you. I cried and hugged him, my heart like a knife. Samuel Jeremiah seemed relieved. His eyes closed softly, his breathing so weak that he could barely feel it. Samuel Jeremiah, speak. We went to the hospital. If you don't go, I'll keep crying to you. My eyes hurt from crying. I was so flustered that I couldn't say anything about such a childish reason. But in the next second, Samuel Jeremiah suddenly opened his eyes. Zora Judd, let's go to the hospital. I'll just go. Don't cry. I was stunned, tears still hanging on my face, forgetting to react. This fool is still thinking about me at this time. Samuel Jeremiah struggled to get to his feet, and I hurriedly helped him up. He seemed to think of something, and his breathing became extremely heavy. If it's in the plot, His voice was even weaker, but still with a strong supplication. I'm going to be very bad and probably do something very bad to you. But don't want me. Please, don't leave me. Samuel Jeremiah's injury healed quickly. During my stay in the hospital, I stayed with him and took care of him. When he woke up and saw me for the first time, he was always very happy to take me into his arms. But the next second, as if he remembered something, his eyes dodged, and he didn't dare to make eye contact with me. Samuel Jeremiah's anomalies made me feel very uneasy. I know, he's scared. I'm afraid that the so-called plot will control him, and do things that hurt me, just like he said that day. Actually, I have some speculation in my mind. Strange things happen frequently during this time, and it is impossible to say that it has nothing to do with the plot. The thought of Samuel Jeremiah holding me that day and whispering in prayer made my heart tingle. He'd rather face it himself than let me get hurt a bit. I took his hand and comforted him softly. Samuel Jeremiah, don't be afraid. No matter what happens, I'll be there for you. He looked at me with tears in his eyes. Zora Judd. He hugged me tightly, as if to melt me into his blood. Samuel Jeremiah, I whispered to him, can you tell me what the plot is? He stiffened and tried to push me away, but he didn't give up. Zora Judd, don't ask. There was a tremor in his voice. I knew what he was afraid of. Nothing more than that I couldn't accept that my end was too tragic. I gently patted him on the back and said softly, Samuel Jeremiah, I'm not afraid. Please tell me, whether it ends well or badly. Let's face it together. Okay. He was silent for a long time, so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. Zora Judd promises me that you won't be afraid of me when I'm done. Okay. Samuel Jeremiah's voice was full of unease and supplication. My heart ached, but my face remained silent. I promise you, Samuel Jeremiah. You name it. Samuel Jeremiah took a deep breath and spoke slowly. Sophia and I fell in love at first sight, worked hand in hand, and eventually succeeded in starting a business. And you tried to ruin our relationship, and I ended up sending you to prison. It didn't take a few years too. It's all my fault. I'm sorry, Zora Judd. Although I was ready, my heart was still sour after hearing the ending. Looking at Samuel Jeremiah's state, he has definitely experienced the plot more than once, and it's hard to imagine how Samuel Jeremiah survived. I took a deep breath and calmed down. Samuel Jeremiah, can you tell me how many times the plot has been repeated? He looked up, his eyes full of confusion and helplessness. I don't know, Zora Judd, I don't know. Maybe 5. Maybe 6. I really don't remember exactly. All I know is that if we don't have the perfect story, we're all going to do it all over again. Samuel Jeremiah couldn't stop crying at this point, and he hugged me tightly, as if he was afraid that I would disappear suddenly. Zora Judd, I've hurt you so many times. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I was also flustered, but I still pretended to be calm, and gently patted him on the back. Samuel Jeremiah, it's not your fault. Don't overthink it. Now in this situation, we can only go along with the plot. Hey, if we can find Sophia, maybe we can escape like her. I don't know which word touched Samuel Jeremiah, and his newly relieved mood was ignited again. Samuel Jeremiah shook his head in pain, tears streaming down the corners of his eyes. No, Zora Judd, don't look for Sophia. You won't be able to look for it. I won't let you see that woman. I was a little stunned. Samuel Jeremiah was a little strange to me at the moment. In the past, he was pitiful, and he was cute and coquettish, and now he is fierce, and his tone is unprecedentedly cold. My little milk puppy, where has it gone? My surprise was so obvious that Samuel Jeremiah changed to his pathetic look. Zora Judd, I'm sorry. I didn't want to kill you. I just don't want you to see Sophia. I'm so scared of losing you. Zora Judd. Samuel Jeremiah's tone was softer than ever, and every word he uttered seemed to float on a cloud. But my heart sank to the bottom. Something is wrong. Samuel Jeremiah must have something to hide from me. He didn't want me to see Sophia so much. It must have been Sophia who knew something. Bad thoughts gradually rose in my heart. Maybe there is no fiction at all. Perhaps Sophia is not missing at all. Maybe Samuel Jeremiah lied to me from start to finish. I shudder at the thought of Samuel Jeremiah. His meekness and well-behaved should all be pretended, and the coldness just now is his true character. But I can't figure it out. He cares about me, and his love for me doesn't seem to be fake. All these are full of mysteries. But the clues are clear. As long as you find Sophia, you can get a glimpse of the truth. But Samuel Jeremiah resisted so much that I could only try it slowly. I sorted out my emotions, and gave him a smile. I know. Don't scare yourself all the time. Hey. As usual, I touched his head as a sign of comfort. Samuel Jeremiah was very useful, and he took me into his arms and sniffed me greedily. I quietly slipped out of his arms. All right, you wait for me here, and I'll go through the discharge procedures for you. He was a little reluctant, but nodded anyway. I stood up and walked out of the room. Suddenly, I turned my head back to him. He sat on the hospital bed, looking sad. The sun shone down on him through the window, gilding him with a layer of gold. but it still failed to illuminate his gloomy face. He sat there like that, like a white jade statue that had been carefully carved. It's just that this statue is full of cracks, and if you don't pay attention, it will shatter to the ground. Samuel Jeremiah, what are you hiding from me? Why do you look so sad? Even if you are a piece, I will pick you up piece by piece, piece by piece. Although Samuel Jeremiah and I had tacitly agreed not to mention the search for Sophia, this mysterious woman suddenly appeared in my house one day. It was an ordinary day, and Samuel Jeremiah and I were on the couch watching a movie. Suddenly, there was the sound of glass breaking, followed by a woman breaking in. The woman was dressed in a black bodysuit, with short hair neatly, and a pair of black marten boots on her feet. The gun in his hand was aimed at Samuel Jeremiah's heart. Almost as soon as he saw the woman, Samuel Jeremiah assumed an extremely aggressive posture. He was hunched and fanged slightly, like a large carnivore in nature. Samuel Jeremiah, let her go. A woman's voice came. No way, I'm not going to let go. Before he could finish speaking, Samuel Jeremiah hugged me tighter, as if to merge me into his blood. The two of them were too tense, as if they would tear their faces in the next second. I poked my head out of Samuel Jeremiah's arms and dared to ask, "Who are you and why did you break into my house and point a gun at my boyfriend?" The woman replied indifferently, "Me. In your world, it's called Sophia. TSK. That's bad luck." Sophia seemed a little impatient. The first time I took on an official mission, I ran into Samuel Jeremiah, a crazy love brain. "What? She's Sophia. Mission. And what is it? Isn't she the missing heroine?" After meeting Sophia, there were more and more confusing things. I rubbed my temples with a bit of a headache. My movements were fully watched by Samuel Jeremiah, who relented his grip and asked softly, "What's wrong, Zora Judd?" Instead of answering his question, I asked him rhetorically, "You lied to me, you pretended to be." Although it is a rhetorical question, it is the tone of the statement. Samuel Jeremiah turned red almost instantly. "No, Zora Judd, I don't have." Samuel Jeremiah looked broken. He shook his head helplessly over and over again, his lips trembling violently, but he still couldn't open oral justification. After all, in a way, he really lied to me. At this time, Sophia suddenly attacked Samuel Jeremiah. "I have been looking for you for so long. I must arrest you back in the bureau today." With that, she was about to pull the trigger. I didn't have time to think, and I subconsciously stood in front of Samuel Jeremiah. "Get out of the way." Sophia's voice came. "I don't do anything to ordinary people." I didn't hear it, and I wasn't moved. Ordinary people? Isn't Samuel Jeremiah also an ordinary person? As if to see what I was thinking, Sophia snorted and put away her gun. "Samuel Jeremiah is no ordinary man. He's going to turn the world upside down for you." Sophia probably hated Samuel Jeremiah, and gritted her teeth and continued, "And once is not enough. This is the dozens of times so far. The old lady has been here 5 or 6 times in place of the real Sophia." "What? I don't understand something." "Oh, I've really convinced you little couples." Sophia waved her hand, and the next second, some fragments of memories suddenly popped into my mind. I looked at Samuel Jeremiah, who was so fragile in my memory, that I could barely breathe. Samuel Jeremiah, how can he be so stupid? Sophia's voice came again, interrupting my thoughts. "He thought that he could save you by starting over, but he didn't expect that the world consciousness would increase the difficulty again and again in order to maintain the stability of this world. By this time, it's almost a dead end." Sophia shrugged her shoulders in frustration. It was true that the plot was the same as Samuel Jeremiah told me, and it wasn't until after my death that the plot changed. That's what Samuel Jeremiah didn't tell me. Almost as soon as I died, he was out of the grip of the plot. When Samuel Jeremiah regained consciousness, the first thing he did was to seek me. It's just that unfortunately, he came a step late. My body had been cremated, and all he took with him was a small jar of ashes. With red eyes, he carefully held the urn as if I were some fragile treasure. Samuel Jeremiah was almost insane after losing me. Endless remorse came at him like a wave, almost drowning him. He blamed everything on the fact that he woke up too late. If he had woken up earlier, nothing would have happened and I wouldn't have died. Finally, on a rainy night, he ended his life. After his death, He was amazed to find that he did not really die, but came back to life again. This discovery gave Samuel Jeremiah great comfort. No matter how early he woke up, I would have died in his arms. But Samuel Jeremiah never gave up. He did it again and again, and failed again and again. Samuel Jeremiah went from being in high spirits at the beginning to being painful and numb. He didn't know how many times he experienced the pain of losing his lover. And he didn't tell me all this. He was just a man who suffered all the pain in silence. I turned my head to look at Samuel Jeremiah, my eyes aching, and I almost choked up and said, "Samuel Jeremiah, you fool." Samuel Jeremiah just laughed, and reached out to rub my head. "Zora Judd, I'm fine. As long as you're by my side, I'm not afraid of anything. But I'll be distressed," I said with tears in my voice. Samuel Jeremiah stiffened when he heard this, and then he hugged me tightly in his arms. "I'm sorry, Zora Judd. I made you cry." "Zora Judd doesn't cry, okay?" His voice was soft, like the water of a pond on a spring day. I buried myself in his chest, and let out a muffled, Sophia looked at us and rolled her eyes wide. Okay, you little couple, don't get tired of it. Hurry up and think about how to deal with the world consciousness. Samuel Jeremiah took me behind him, and looked at Sophia warily. Sophia was speechless. "Big brother, I said I was actually here to help you. Do you believe it?" She seemed to suddenly remember that she still had a gun in her hand, and put it away with a sneer. Don't mind. I'm actually a conservative. It's just that I'm a little radical today." Samuel Jeremiah pursed his lips and did not speak. I tugged at the corner of his coat, and motioned for him not to be nervous. "Is there anything you can do to help us?" I said with hope. "Sophia, she must have a way." "Hey, I'm not sleepy when I say this." Sophia's voice was filled with excitement. "It's very simple. Just let your boyfriend and I go back and squat for 2 years. Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the Time and Space Bureau. And there is a department dedicated to the world of fiction. It's real. I've got it." Afraid that we wouldn't believe it, Sophia showed us her papers. Samuel Jeremiah looked straight at her. "It's as simple as that. Of course, big brother, I'll do something. Don't worry. Besides, if you don't go back with me, my winnings will be ruined." Samuel Jeremiah still looked at Sophia, unmoved. Sophia frowned and compromised. Okay, I'll get your little girlfriend over too." I quietly tugged at Samuel Jeremiah's sleeve, and signaled that he was almost there. Sophia noticed my small gesture and was noncommittal, but her tone was unconcealably cheerful. Okay, then it's decided. I'll send you to the Space-Time Bureau." Sophia stretched out her hand, and a huge black hole appeared in front of her eyes. She turned her head and smiled at us. "Welcome to Space-Time Bureau." Sophia takes us into a black hole, as if we have just passed through a thin film, and we have come to a place full of technology. Here, I looked around curiously. "This is the Space-Time Bureau, and I'm an agent of the Time-Space Bureau. Codenamed 007. Sophia triumphantly introduced. 007. I raised an eyebrow. Isn't that the secret agent code name from the movie? Sophia rolled her eyes at me. What? Can't I call 007? Yes, of course. I laughed and agreed. Sophia nodded in satisfaction, then turned to Samuel Jeremiah and said, "Come with me, let's go through the formalities." Samuel Jeremiah nodded, then turned to look at me. "Zora Judd, you wait here for me, I'll be back shortly." Sophia was about to leave, but she felt that something was not right, and she screamed, "Hey, no, you can't come back in the next few years. Originally, you didn't have a few years, but it wouldn't be easy to say if you sneaked out. So big brother, you have to calm down. After 5 or 6 years of hard work, I will be happy in the second half of my life. Don't worry. She can visit you often." I threw myself into Samuel Jeremiah's arms, and greedily sucked his breath. "Samuel Jeremiah, I'll wait for you to come back." Samuel Jeremiah kissed me on the top of my head with pity and hummed in a deep tone. A few years passed in a flash. At this point, Samuel Jeremiah was finally standing in front of me. It was obviously something to be happy about, but my eyes were still red. Samuel Jeremiah leaned down and gently wiped away tears for me. "Don't cry, Zora Judd. Your puppy will be distressed." The end.